Welcome. It's nice to have you here. As those of you who are here live know, this is Relaxing to Health, Wealth, and Happiness. And you know what that means. Um, Probably. If you don't, then don't worry. I will explain it. And I'll be explaining it for the benefit of those on YouTube who happen across this and they feel strangely compelled to watch. Um, so the intention of this meeting is to be in support of self-realization. The benefit of self-realization is that you finally know who you are and what you want, and you can give your attention to that instead of everything else. And wouldn't that be nice? I mean, think about it. You're giving your attention to something all the time, but most of what you give your attention to it does not give you good results. You don't feel satisfied with it. So if you don't know who you are and what you want, which is the same thing, then you don't know what to put your attention on, and therefore you won't get good results. It's pretty simple, right? But most people, I'm getting ahead of myself here. This is all of the talk, but I'll say it now and then I'll say it again later. Most people are giving their attention to everything else. And what a waste it is, because then each day is a repetition of the last. It appears a little bit different, but I often refer to that as rearranging the furniture. I mean, it's nothing really different. You've rearranged the furniture. You give yourself a sense of novelty, but it doesn't last because you just set yourself up to be addicted to novelty, not to anything of real value. And so you're just then compelled to rearrange the furniture day after day after day after day, but it's empty and meaningless. And there's something there that is haunting you because you have this sense that, gee, it doesn't seem like there's really anything actually truthful here. It just seems like rearranging the furniture because that's what it is. So self-realization, far from being like a thing for a rare few, it's for everybody. Everybody should know who they are. If you don't know who you are, you're surely wasting your time. And it's not a moral issue. It's not it's nothing like that. It's just for your own well-being, so that you can actually experience true happiness. You should know who you are and what you want. And again, it's not only an elitist thing, it's for everybody. It's every single person should know who they are. It's when you see how obvious that is, then it's a wonder that everything is organized the way that it is, because that should be the number one focus for everybody. Instead of focusing on ABCs and 1, 2, 3s, it should be, who are you? And then the ABCs and 1, 2, 3s, if it's relevant. So that's the benefit. The benefit is that it's the foundation of everything. It gives you everything. Honestly, if you don't know who you are, then you can't expect to have anything of any real value, because even if you attain everything that everybody else considers to be of value, everything that the whole world says is of value, you could have all the money and all the power and all the fame and all the whatever else anybody else wants, the comforts and the entertainment and the whatever, the creative genius and so forth and so on, and it will be absolutely meaningless to you, worthless, because it will be defined by what everybody else says, but it won't be coming from your own soul. It won't be actually based on the truth of who you are, because you have to know you. It doesn't do any good to know what everybody else says. So to actually finally know yourself is the most important thing, absolutely the most important thing. So that's the benefit. which is immense. It's everything. I mean, it's really so foundational. It's amazing that anybody talks about or thinks about or focuses on anything else. I mean, I guess there's something to be said for basic survival stuff, but basic survival stuff also, what's the point if it's for living somebody else's life, which is what almost everybody's doing. So much better to be yourself, and if that means being yourself for only 1 minute, better that than 100 years of being somebody else. So self-realization gives you everything, and it's for everybody. It doesn't matter. It's regardless of your religious beliefs, your political orientation, all the rest of it. Who cares? All of that is of far secondary importance. This is for everybody. It's even prior to being human. All of us have that much in common, that we're all human. But even prior to that is to actually know yourself, because who you are is much bigger and much bigger than being human. It's much more primary than being human. So this is for everybody. So I think that covers it, right? What's the intention? What are the benefits? Who it's for? So now, and how to benefit, how to make the best use of this meeting. So as I often point out, it's in the name: relax into health, wealth, and happiness. So the relaxation is active relaxation. It's not to numb yourself and zone out. It's not about going to sleep. It's about being aware of yourself, noticing what's actually going on without getting caught up in the analysis and judgments and reactions to it, but to actually just be aware. And that probably requires a little bit of explanation, because it's like a whole lesson in itself. So I'll take a moment just to clarify that so that everybody can benefit maximally. So this active relaxation is we'll do a remedial lesson in active relaxation presently. So it does not require that you close your eyes. You can do it with eyes open or eyes closed, but just as a lesson in the basics of it, close the eyes if it's comfortable. If it's not, or if you're driving or something, obviously don't close the eyes. But if it's comfortable and safe to do so, then close the eyes, just to be more inwardly focused. As I have often pointed out, our sensory processing usually it involves an enormous amount of our attention and energy. And the external visual stimulus is probably more than most of the other senses. So just closing the eyes is a simple thing we can do that dampens down a lot of that external stimulus and allows us just to notice what's going on in a more primitive way, more primal way, a way that maybe is not so quick to labels and analysis. Because the visual stimulus, we immediately, without it even being a conscious thing, it's just an automatic thing, labeling things, differentiating this versus that, foreground versus background, threats versus friends. So if we close the eyes, then maybe we just start to notice there's just sort of this soup of stuff just bubbling, all kinds of stuff happening, sensation, thought, energy. So we can just notice that all of that's happening before we try to judge it. And maybe the judgment happens, it's fine. You don't have to try to stop that, but you can just notice that it's all happening. And in noticing that it's happening, maybe you can start to just be more relaxed, meaning You're not trying to fix it. You're not trying to understand it. You're not trying to solve it. Rather, you're just, maybe we could say, witness to it. You're just aware, because there's so much happening. And as you just notice it without trying to do anything about it, maybe you start to notice the impossibility of actually truly understanding it. Because what we're actually talking about, when you really just observe it, you notice there's so much. It's actually infinite. There's no end to it. There's no end in any sense. In time and space, it extends infinitely in all directions. So one thought, and then another thought, and then another thought, and another thought, and another thought, and then another thought, and then another thought, and then another thought, and this sensation, and then that sensation, and then the next sensation, and the next sensation, etc. And so in time, just endlessly happening, but also in space and in all other sense of dimension, it's just happening infinitely. There's no way to contain it. And if you start to really observe it, then you see that it's happening, that there's such a granularity to it, that also in that way it's infinite. If you just keep looking and looking and looking, you'll see it's so many little particles of experience. So how are you ever going to get hold of that and understand it? There's no way to do it. So if you're just actively relaxing, choosing just to observe rather than trying to grasp it, then automatically it starts to shift you into this mode of what we call pure presence. There's no way to get anything or hold anything or fix anything or understand anything or do anything with any of it, but there's just a presence to it, which is just receptive, receiving, open, aware. And there's such a magnificence to this presence. We don't normally notice it, but in this state, it's possible to actually notice. So if you want to keep the eyes closed, you keep the eyes closed. If you want to open the eyes, feel free to open the eyes, but maybe that gives you a sense, possibly, of what I'm talking about when I say active relaxation, to notice, not trying to grasp, not trying to fix. It's very different from our normal habitual way of doing things. The habitual way is I need to understand it so I can store that information so I can do something with it in the future so that I can get some future outcome. But you just notice that that usual habitual way actually does not give good results. Maybe it gives good results for certain things. Maybe it's good for certain kinds of learning, like ABCs and 1, 2, 3s. If you wanted to become a rocket scientist, for example, maybe that has some value. I don't know. I'm not particularly interested in rocket science, so it's not something I give a lot of attention to. I can't say one way or the other. Maybe it has value, maybe it doesn't. But for sure, here, in terms of actually knowing yourself, that mode of functioning does not have any value at all, because that's all about something other than you. Notice that you are ungraspable, unfindable. You can't find a limit to yourself. You can find limits to your ideas of yourself, right? I mean, you say, oh, I am this body, I am this personality, I am this mind, I am this story of myself that started when I was born or started when I was conceived, or whatever idea you have about it. But the one that you actually are, the one who's aware of all of that, the one who can notice all of that, the one in which all of that is appearing and disappearing, that one, which is independent, which doesn't come and go, which doesn't uh, ever just kind of covers it. It's independent and it doesn't come and go, right? That's you. And there's no limit to that. There's no boundary to it. You can't find where it begins and where it ends. So how are you going to do anything with that at the habitual level of mind, which is analytical, separating, putting things, sorting things into categories, and then storing it for later so that you can do something with it? And anyway, even if you could, what are you going to do with yourself in the future? And what would that one be that you'd be doing something with? It's like it's not life at that point. It's a specimen. And the truth is that life is alive. You are alive. You're not a specimen. You're not something that you can operate on. There are things you can operate on, and that has some value. Like maybe talk about that, maybe not. I don't know if that will come up, but primary, fundamental, before any of that, is to actually know yourself. Because if you don't know yourself, if you don't know yourself as that which does not come and go, that which is actually stable, then you are you have no ability to actually function, because your imagination of yourself, where you're putting your attention, how you're understanding yourself, and where you're functioning from, also is coming and going. So there's no stability there. Whereas, and before I say anything else about that, just notice that's probably how you've experienced much of your life, and notice what that experience is like. It's frustrating, right? You don't have, if you don't, you'll feel powerless, victim mentality, because you'll feel like, I can never quite get it right. I can never figure it out. I can never fix everything. I can never understand it enough. Because if you don't know who you are as that which is stable, that which is eternal, then you have no platform from which to observe anything. You're also coming and going along with everything else. So you need to actually know yourself as that which is independent, which has stability, eternity, which is able to, which is continuous, in order to be able to have any leverage to be able to function in an optimized way. Otherwise, what's happening is that there's a lot of I'll use the same analogy that I've often used, and maybe it will make sense and maybe it won't. When I was a child, those who are here live, you'll know this story. When I was a child, I would uh, go to stores with my mother when she would go shopping, and like the grocery store, for example, had an arcade game in the foyer, whatever you call the entranceway, that you could put in money to play. And when it wasn't being played, it would run a sequence on the screen to try and attract children or anybody to come and put money in it. So it would show the game in play, but it wasn't actually being played. It was all predetermined sequence of screen events. And I didn't always have the money to put into the machine, so I would sometimes just pretend like I was playing, just put my finger on the buttons and the joystick and move them around and pretend like I was playing. And sometimes it would just so happen that I would push the button and move the joystick in just the right way, in synchrony with the movement on the screen, and it would seem as though I was doing it. So this can lead to superstition, sense that, oh, maybe there was something that I did that led to that. But then it's not very repeatable, obviously, because there was no actual doership involved. So if you mistake yourself to be that which is coming and going, you have no power, no leverage, because you don't truly know yourself as independent. So you're also just at the if you understand yourself to be another object within a field of objects, then you all you can really have is superstition. or a sense of total powerlessness. Those are the only two options available to you because, I think, because the nature of all the objects is that they're all just bouncing around, right? So Newton described this with his laws of motion, right? That an object at rest tends to stay at rest, but an object in motion tends to stay at motion unless there's some interaction with some other object. And then, an object equal object of whatever, however it's described, it's like motion, energy is neither created nor destroyed. That's maybe thermodynamics, but it's changes state, and it can be transferred, right? So this object hits this object, that object reacts by moving. So all of this world of objects, of things, of material, it's all just reaction. It's just moving objects based on reaction, past causes producing present experiences, interactions just being transfer of energy. So and this is classically described as karma, right? So everything that's happening is karma. This thing is happening, this object is moving because of karma. That interacts, that thing interacts with this thing, and then this thing, that karma, there's some interaction of karma, reaction occurs, but it's all just sort of mechanical. So at that level, you have no ability to do anything, and so if you have a sense that you're doing something, it's just because of superstition. It's just a sense that you're mistakenly believing that you've done something because something just happened to occur in coincidence that led you to believe that you had some volition in that. So, but the good news is that there's a way out of that, which is to actually know yourself. And then the miracle is in knowing yourself, you're outside of that framework of karma. You're outside of that framework of mechanical action and reaction. Then you have the ability to actually do something. So again, self-realization is fundamental. Otherwise, you're just living you're living as another character in a video game that doesn't actually have any volition. It's just pre-programmed. It's just the thing's going to move that way because that's how it's programmed, because that's the karma. But it's possible to change all that when you actually step outside of it, or when you realize that you are outside of that. So the active relaxation allows that. So if you are in doubt at any point, if you start to get, overthinking, if you're scratching your head and wondering and trying to figure out what are you going to do with all of this, how are you going to solve your problems in the future, then just come back to active relaxation. I mean, the truth is, maybe this would be more productive if we just sat in silence, just observing our experience. But very few people are going to show up for that. I mean, as it is, not that many people show up, but very few people would show up for that. So, it's a different approach, but it's the same thing is available. But don't be mistaken about it. In fact, in some ways, there's more potential here than just sitting in silence. Because what's possible is to realize the silence that's always here, independent of the activity. And then there's a real integration, which allows you to live in and from yourself as that silence amidst all of the activity. Because what happens is it is definitely valuable to sit in silence. And I encourage everybody to do that. do it more often, it will be helpful to you. Just take 5 minutes at a time, a few times a day. Just sit in silence, do breath awareness, um, because it will be enormously valuable to you. But if that was all you did, then it's very difficult, because what happens is then you have that experience, and superstition again comes into play, because you'll say, well, when I was sitting in silence with my eyes closed, I was watching my breath, and then this amazing thing happened. This epiphany came, or this realization, or I had some profound spiritual experience, or whatever. Something happens, and then you say, oh, well, it was because I was sitting in silence. And it's a half truth. I mean, it is true, but it's only half true, because the part that's true is, yes, because you're sitting in silence, but the half that's not true is that the silence was determined by the circumstances, because you were sitting with your eyes closed. Maybe sitting with your eyes closed makes it easier to discover that ever-present silence, but the silence is ever present. The silence is what is continuous. The silence is who you are. It is that which is always here. And so what is a higher level realization of greater value is to realize that silence is here always, independent, and you can have that awareness integrated with all of the activity and all of the motion. Because otherwise, then you're going to end up fighting with all of the activity that's going on. But really, what you want is integration. So take time every day, sit with your eyes closed or with eyes open, and just be silent. Just be aware. Very valuable. And take time every day while engaged in activity to just notice that same silence. So the reason I say that this meeting has a lot of potential beyond sitting with your eyes closed in silence is that it allows you to actually have that integrated awareness that this silence is always here. This active relaxation allows you to discover that that's true. So even as the mind is doing all of its calculations and scheming and trying to figure out what it's going to do with all of this so that it can solve its future problems and arrive at some future permanent state and all the things that it's always trying to figure out, you can also notice that presently there's profound okayness. Profound okayness, even though all that other stuff is going on, even though there might be an experience and a perception of pain of all kinds, physical pain, mental pain, emotional pain, whatever kind of pain. There might be that experience, and simultaneous to that and independent of that is profound okayness, independent, as always untouched by all of that. And you don't have to convince yourself of this. I wouldn't really encourage you to. If convincing happens, then that's great, but don't try. Just allow. Just keep allowing this active relaxation where you're just noticing that all of this activity is taking place. The mind is doing its thing, the body is doing its thing, all of the things are doing their things, stuff happening, bouncing around, reacting as it's always done. Sun rises, the sun sets. So you can just notice that all of that is happening. And simultaneous to that, and independent of that, is this continuous silent presence that's totally unaffected. And you can notice that this continuous presence is truly continuous. So if it's just a thought that says, oh yeah, it must be continuous, that makes sense, then it doesn't really help you a great deal. What helps you much more is actually just to notice it, just to notice the truth of it, that all of the other stuff comes and goes. So sometimes you feel happy, sometimes you feel sad. Sometimes you think you've got it, sometimes you think you don't. Sometimes you think that things are going your way, sometimes it seems like they're not going your way. Regardless of all of that, there's this continuous silent presence. And all of the other things are appearing and disappearing from and into that. And you are always here. You don't have to try. You don't have to figure anything out to always be here. You don't have to have a continuously pleasant experience. All that's necessary is just to notice that you are actually always here. But the one who's always here is not your idea of yourself. It's not the body or the mind or the story of yourself, because all of that you can, if you look at it closely enough, you'll see that it's not always here. It comes and goes. Simple, probably simple and probably obvious example of that is that every 24 hours or so you have some sleep cycle, and during the sleeping and dreaming states, this body and mind and story of yourself are not here. In fact, the whole world is not here. So, easy. It's a funny thing because that's easy to sort of trivialize, but it's profound if you just notice it. It's true. You have this experience very regularly that everything that you take to be real and true is not here. And yet you are here. Undeniably, you are here continuously. How do you know? Because you're the one that knows. If you were not here, then how would you know? Right? You know that you were asleep, you know that you were dreaming. Why? Because you're here. You know that you're awake because you're here. You all this is only possible because you're here, because of presence. It's just that most of the time we're accustomed to, just out of habit, thinking of ourselves in a particular way. We make a lot of assumptions, and those assumptions cause us to overlook what's actually totally obvious, which is that I am the one that is here now, presently, continuously, eternally, and that everything else is coming and going in this. So, and you just notice no matter what is happening in your waking state, for better or for worse, when you are asleep, none of that matters. You could have just won the lottery. You could have just landed in prison. You could be, you could be on tip-top physical condition, or you could be experiencing excruciating physical pain. And when you are in deep sleep, none of that exists. I mean, it's just should be if we're not accustomed to conceiving of ourselves in any other way, it would just be totally obvious. So the big part of the problem is just that we are uh, just in the habit, a very strong habit of thinking in a particular way and believing those thoughts that actually contradict the obvious reality. So this is the foundation. And if you try to do something with this it becomes very difficult. So rather than trying to do something with it, I would suggest you just keep noticing. Just keep noticing that everything's, all the stuff, all the feelings, the thoughts, the sensations, and the sensations include all of the stuff, all of the visual stimulus, the tactile stimulus, and so forth. All of that is just coming and going. And simultaneous to that and independent of that is this silent presence. Now, you can then also start to notice, and this is somewhat subtle, which is why it's not of much value unless you're actually observing this directly. So anything else that I can say, you have to actually notice it, observe it directly, not just try to think about it. If you think about it, it's really not of much value unless you're directly observing it. So when in doubt, just active relaxation. Just relax and just observe. Just notice what's actually happening. Just notice that there's content, a stream of content. And that stream of content, there's a tendency to try and tell a story about it and make sense of it from the perspective of the one that you think of yourself as being, but the one you think of yourself as being is just more content. And so again, there's tremendous instability there because there's no anchoring in anything truly stable. That one that you think of yourself as being, it's constantly changing, constantly, because it can't be otherwise. It has to, because it's just another object that's in, together with all the other objects. And keep in mind that this is no energy is not created nor destroyed. This is one of Newton's laws. Energy is not created nor destroyed. It just changes state. So if I think that I'm this thing that is a thing that's energy, then, and obviously everything is changing, well, then the one that I think of myself as being also necessarily has to be changing in reaction to accommodate all the other changes, because everything's fitting everything else like a glove. It's seamless, perfect. Everything that exists has to be in harmony with everything else. Now, that harmony might not be your idea of harmony, so forget about that. I'm not saying, it's like everybody's sitting around singing Kumbaya, holding hands kind of harmony. It's the kind of harmony where just that everything is actually the seamless happening. So as an example, if I wiggle my fingers as I'm doing, then that wiggling of the fingers necessitates that everything else is accommodating that. So, or put another way, my fingers are wiggling because everything else, in order to accommodate the moving of everything else. So, obviously nothing can change unless everything else is changing to accommodate that change. So if I'm thinking that I'm this one who is subject to change, which is what most of us are believing ourselves to be, because it is changing. Obviously, if I believe I'm this body, then the body's clearly changing. It's not the same body it was a year ago or 5 years ago or 10 years ago. I mean, sorry to break it to you, but take a look at a picture of yourself from 10 years ago and you'll see. And the story of yourself is always changing. So anything that you can think of yourself as being, that thing is subject to change, which means that it's not stable. And not only is it not stable, but it's completely dependent. It's not independent at all. Its change is in harmony with the change, with all other change that's occurring. So the problem is, as long as I think I'm that thing, then I don't have a stable point of view. So my point of view is ever shifting, but I'm thinking that I'm stable. I'm thinking that my point of view is somehow stable, whereas it's not. So I'm delusional, if that's the case. So again, not a way to live if you want contentment. Not a, it's a great way to live if you want frustration, but it's a terrible way to live if you want satisfaction. So, which is why just forget about all of that for a moment and just notice that the actual truth of yourself, which is totally independent, which is completely reliable, is ungraspable. It's this silent presence, which is eternally here now. And you can just notice that all the other stuff is moving in this presence. So before you try to do anything with it, just forget about that for a moment. Forget about trying to fix it or anything. I understand it's really hard because we really want to fix it. And I put myself in the same category. We really, really, really want to fix it. And there is a way, but the way to fix it is not to fix it, because if you try to fix it, you're already putting yourself in a position in which you're guaranteeing that you'll fail, because you're putting yourself in this position that's delusional, where you're imagining that you're this thing that has no stability, so you have no leverage. Think about it. If you're floating around in the sky and you're trying to push things, you don't have any leverage to be able to succeed in that. You'll get pushed away at the same rate as you push the other thing away. Whereas if you're actually stable, if you have your feet on the ground and you push the thing, then you have leverage. So we need to have that kind of stability. So in order to have that stability, we have to first let go of this this very difficult habit of identifying as that which has no stability. And so every time you're trying to fix things, you're identifying as that which has no stability. And so you're guaranteed that your efforts are going to be in vain, at least almost entirely in vain. So the key first step, which I'm repeating myself, but the key first step is relax. Notice that you are that in which all the activity is taking place. Just notice it. It's not at all difficult to notice. It's maybe difficult to think about. It may be difficult to persuade yourself of the truth of it. It might be difficult to relax adequately into it, but it's not difficult just to notice it. Just for an instant, you can notice that sure enough, all of this is happening in this silent awareness that I am. So this is the foundation, and we just have to keep coming back to it over and 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 over. Now, from this, it is possible to actually produce change, but it's tricky because of the tendency to again get caught up in the habit of identifying as something unstable. So we have to really keep telling the truth and keep coming back over and over and over and over to the act of relaxation and noticing that I am that silent presence, that space in which everything is moving, everything is appearing and disappearing. Every thought is coming into existence and then disappearing from existence in this space of continuous consciousness. How can you know that that's true? You can't convince yourself in thought, but you can notice it directly. So just notice, just maybe close the eyes, just watch and see that a thought appears, thought disappears, Another thought appears. Another thought disappears. And you just keep watching, and you'll see that there's a space in which the thoughts are appearing and disappearing. And that space, I'm just using the word space, it's not really space, but that space does not come and go. It's not dependent on the existence of the thoughts. The thoughts are here or not here, but the space is always here. And you can't convince yourself of this in thought necessarily, but you can just observe it. It's totally obvious. I mean, it couldn't be otherwise. So you can just notice that this is the case. And then you can notice that there's this tendency to identify as a thought. You maybe could call it other things, but there's some, whatever you want to call it, I'll just call it a thought. And it just gets inserted into everything. I've talked about this before. This is an observation Ramana made. He said, if you just watch the arising of every thought, you'll see that there's a me thought. I don't know what this is, the translation. I don't know what the words were that he used, because I don't speak that language, but the translation is, you watch, you'll see there's a me thought or an I thought that gets, it's at a very subtle level, it gets attached on. So there's just this movement that occurs. And then, but there's this thing that gets attached onto it that says me, I, mine. So it's not just experience, it's my experience. It's not just thought, it's my thought. It's not just sensation, it's my sensation. It's not just life, it's my life. And so we can just watch very quietly and see this. Again, you can't think your way out of this, but you can watch and observe. Now, most people won't. So you just have to tell the truth. If you're not willing to do it, then just tell the truth about it, so that maybe at some other time when you are ready, you will do it. Versus if you say, it doesn't work, then you're more likely just to completely forget about it. But it's a big difference between whether you're actually applying yourself sincerely, or you're just deluding yourself. So just distinguish between those two things, and then do whatever's going to work best for you. If you're able and willing, then just quietly observe. Just watch for the next thought. And you have to be very patient. Even if the next, sometimes the thoughts are tricky. I'll say the next thought will be, I can't find a thought. And it will slip by. You'll say, I can't find a thought. It doesn't work. But you have to notice, oh, that was the thought. And then notice, oh yeah, I can't find a thought. I can't find a thought. But who is this I? This is just a thought. It's just a thought. This is I. I can't find the thought. So you have to look to see who is being referred to here. What is this I? I can't find a thought. I can find a thought. I'm great. I'm terrible. I'm a winner. I'm a loser. Whatever the thought is, I'm succeeding. I'm getting there. I've got it. I'm enlightened. Whatever. You just see this I thought has attached itself at a very subtle level. There's just some subtle arising of energy phenomenon that's appearing out of nothing. And there it is. It's just a little speck of light or wave of light or something, and it's there it is. You can't say anything else about it. It's just there it is. But then this thing latches onto it, says, my thought, my experience, my life. So that's the thing then, that it's not bad, it's not inherently problematic, but it is tricky. In a sense, you really wouldn't be functional if you didn't have that, because if the thought was just, starving, if that was it, if it was just there's a thought, starving. Okay, doesn't so what? But if it's I'm starving, suddenly that might prompt some action. So having a sense of an I sense is not bad. It's part of the game. It's what it's there has to be some I sense for there to be a recipient of the karma, because otherwise there's nothing for anything to bounce off of. It's like if there's no you at all, there's no I, then whatever happens, there's no one there to take receipt. It's not going to have any impact at all. And this apparently happens sometimes, on some occasions. And then, like in the case of Ramana, it seems like Ramana was perfectly content just to sit there in the in the basement of a temple on Arunachala, and allow the insects to eat his flesh. I mean, there was no one there to have any insects eating his flesh. There were maybe insects eating flesh, but there was no one there. And so it was because others moved his body and started, cleaning his body and feeding his body and all this, and that there was a that things were as they were. Otherwise, he would have just sat there. There would have nothing would have happened. Nothing would have happened to him. So, it's good to have, maybe if you want to be functioning in this world, it's essential to have an I sense. But if you identify with the I sense, then it's very difficult. So it's a fine line. We want to be able to have a functional, healthy I sense and also not identify with it, because if we identify with it, again, we are just unconsciously reacting, and there's no actual conscious living taking place. There's just a unconscious drama playing out. So we have to keep coming back over and over and over to this foundation. But then once this foundation of direct recognition of yourself as this silent presence is there, it's possible to actually start to produce change through intention. So out of this awareness of yourself, there's a continuity, because it's true, you are this silent presence, but it's also true that this play of consciousness is not independent actually of this silent presence. So they're not two. They're not really separate. So you can start to actually observe at a subtle level and start to see that what's happening is emerging from this silent presence. and that there is a unique expression of the silent presence that is occurring here that is, we could call you. And it is unique. It's clearly unique. It's not, that you are you and I am me. There's a difference there. At the level of pure consciousness, there's no differentiation, but at the level of expression, there clearly is. So I don't know what you call this. It's a mystery. The mystery of life is that there's a singularity appearing as many. And we are actually able to witness that emergence of the many through the lens of each expression. So your expression you can observe, and you can notice that strangely your expression is very distinct and unique, and your job, as it were, is to be true to that. How can you do that? Well, by just noticing. So you can notice, what is the truth of this one? What is the truth of this one? The truth of Ramana was, Ramana's the unique expression of consciousness as Ramana was, he wore a loincloth and sewed banana leaf plates and sat on a couch that had been foisted upon him and responded to people sometimes when they asked questions. So what's the unique expression through you as you? What is that? And only you can know that. That's why it's your job. Is I can't know that. Nobody else can know that. That's why I said at the beginning, if you live your life and you're completely successful according to everybody else's standards, you almost are certain to have failed in what really matters, which is to actually be true to your expression, to your unique expression. Because how can anybody else know? There's no way that anybody else could know. Only you can know. You're the only one that has access to that. And that's why it's your job. It's your divine responsibility to actually be truthful to you. And the only way you can know that is by watching yourself as you are emerging, not by looking around out there and trying to determine who you should be based on what else is happening out there. Because remember, what else is happening out there can only define you as something that needs to accommodate that. But that has nothing to do with you. It just has to do with that. So in order for you to be truthful to who you actually are as a unique divine expression, you have to actually observe yourself emerging from consciousness, which is only possible if you first and foremost can rest and observe and notice that consciousness exists, and that you are that, and that you are independent, and that you are that none of the other things that are happening can be a threat to you or actually have anything to do with you. That's why it's the foundation, and it's so tricky because we keep wanting to fix things based on what we're seeing and interpreting out there. But we have to keep coming back over and over and over to seeing what is actually happening from its source, which is this silent presence. Then from that, and only from that, not from thinking about it, but from actually observing it, it's possible to see who am I as a unique expression. And again, there's no one else outside of you can tell you. Only you can know. which is why it's so tricky, because we're so accustomed to looking out there and saying, oh, please tell me, please confirm for me, who am I? Am I on the right path? Am I getting it right? And the truth is, only you can know. And so you have to just keep watching to see as it emerges, and then you'll see, and something miraculous will happen where you'll just start to discover that you know the truth, and that you cannot, it is truly inalienable. You can't be separated from it. And then all you have to do is it makes it sound so simple. All you have to do is just keep being true to that. I mean, it's difficult just because that habit of identifying as something that's defined by everything else is such a strong habit. So we usually keep falling back into that habit. But again, if we just keep noticing, just taking the time each day just to notice, I am independent, I am eternal, I am continuous, I am silent, I am present, I am now. We just keep noticing that in our direct experience, not as a thought, but just noticing the truth of it, then we finally have the foundation from which we can observe our unique self-expression emerging from that, and then we can be truthful to it. And it's like, I often liken it to um, like a seed sprouting and growing into a plant, because it's somewhat similar to that. So it's kind of delicate at first. It's like the mighty oak, when it first is sprouting, it's delicate. The little mouse can come and eat it up. So in, we have to be, we have to nurture it. Yeah, it's like we have to just keep nurturing it. And if we're too forceful, if we demand too much of it, then it's we have to start over again. But if we just keep allowing it, nurturing it, allowing it, giving space, coming back to the foundation, feeding the roots, allowing it to blossom, then we see that it grows stronger. So that's it. I'm going to end this recording now. For those who are here live, I'm happy to stay on for Q&A.